At my daughter's wedding, she called me an old intruder and seated me at the waiter's table. I smiled, stayed silent, and canceled the catering I had paid for myself. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I smoothed my dress for the 5th time, checking my reflection in the car window. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the pearl necklace I'd saved 3 months to buy. At 58, I wasn't trying to look younger, just dignified enough for my only daughter's wedding. You can do this, Elise, I whispered to myself, clutching the small purse that contained a handwritten letter for Jasmine. Inside were words I'd spent weeks perfecting, along with a check, the last of my savings meant for retirement. The Westfield Country Club loomed before me, its manicured gardens and stone façade a far cry from the modest venues I'd suggested when Jasmine first announced her engagement. But she had insisted on this place, and I couldn't say no. I never could. Mrs. Mitchell, you're here! The wedding coordinator hurried over, her clipboard clutched to her chest. Jasmine was wondering where you were. I glanced at my watch. Was 30 minutes early. Is everything all right? Oh yes, just some last-minute seating arrangements. The caterers wanted to confirm a few details about the buffet service you've arranged. Pride swelled in my chest. The buffet had cost me $14,000, nearly all I had left after helping with the dress, the flowers, and the deposit for this venue. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital for months, picking up every extra hour I could as a nurse to make this happen. I'll speak with them, I said, following her through the grand entrance. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, white roses cascading from centerpieces, champagne flutes catching the afternoon light. My daughter had always dreamed of elegance, and here it was, manifested through my sacrifice. Mom! Finally! Jasmine's voice cut through my thoughts. She looked breathtaking in her gown, her dark hair swept up elegantly, so much like her father before he left us. Sweetheart, you look beautiful, I said, moving to embrace her. She stiffened, accepting the hug with a quick pat on my back. You're wearing that? Her eyes scanned my blue dress, the nicest I owned. I thought it was appropriate, I said, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. It's fine, I guess. She turned to the coordinator. Did you tell her about the seating change? The coordinator's smile faltered. I was just getting to that, Ms. Mitchell. Jasmine sighed, tapping her manicured nails against her arm. Mom, we had to rearrange things. Richard's family had more people RSVP at the last minute. Important people. Oh, I nodded, understanding. So I'll be sitting with your father's cousins instead? A look passed between Jasmine and the coordinator. Actually, Jasmine said, lowering her voice, you'll be at table 19. The coordinator handed me a small seating card. I stared at it, confusion clouding my thoughts. Table 19? But that's near the kitchen, Jasmine finished for me. It's not a big deal. Richard's father has business associates here, and his mother wanted her bridge club at the main tables. I looked around the room, spotting table 19 tucked in a corner near the service entrance. A waitress was already stacking extra water glasses there. That's the staff table, I said quietly. It's not the staff table, Jasmine snapped. It's just not convenient for them to access. Look, this isn't about you, Mom. It's my wedding day. Richard appeared then, handsome in his tuxedo. Everything okay here, babe? My mother is making a scene about the seating, Jasmine said. I'm not making a scene, I protested softly. She thinks she's too good for table 19, Jasmine continued. Richard's face showed a flicker of discomfort. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sure it's fine, I interrupted, forcing a smile. I was just surprised. God, Mom, stop being such a drama queen, Jasmine hissed. This is exactly why we had to seat you there. You're being a typical intrusive old mother. Just try not to embarrass me, okay? Richard's family is very particular. The words struck like physical blows. Intrusive. Old. Embarrassing. "I understand," I said, my voice barely audible. As they walked away, I overheard Jasmine whisper to Richard, "I told you she'd make it about herself. She always does this." I stood frozen, the seating card trembling in my hand. 31 years of sacrifices flashed through my mind. Working night shifts when Jasmine had fevers, skipping meals when money was tight, selling my mother's jewelry to pay for dance lessons and college applications. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. I took a glass, drinking it quickly before taking another. Then I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and allowed 3 tears, only 3, to fall. When I emerged, I was smiling again. I walked directly to the event office where I had finalized the catering contract last month. "Mrs. Mitchell, is there something I can help you with?" asked the manager. "Yes," I said calmly. "I need to make a change to tonight's arrangements." My hands were steady now as I signed the cancellation form for the entire buffet service. The manager looked concerned. "You understand this is a complete cancellation? With the penalty, you'll only receive a 20% refund." I nodded. "I understand perfectly. Sometimes lessons cost more than money." As I walked back to the ceremony, I felt strangely light. For once, I wouldn't be the only one making sacrifices today. As I sat in my assigned corner, watching Jasmine float through her ceremony with practiced grace, my mind drifted back to where it all began. This distance between us that had grown from a crack to a canyon. She hadn't always been ashamed of me. There was a time when my daughter would run into my arms after my 12-hour shifts, her small face lighting up when I walked through the door. "Mommy's home," she would squeal, showing me artwork she'd created while I was gone. I remembered her at 8 years old, the year Robert left us for his 26-year-old secretary. Jasmine had crawled into my bed night after night, her small body racked with sobs. "Why doesn't Daddy want us anymore?" she'd ask, and I would hold her tight, promising that we would be okay, that I would always be there. I kept that promise, working day and night shifts at Memorial Hospital. Nursing wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, most of them anyway. There were months when I survived on peanut butter sandwiches so Jasmine could have new shoes for school or attend a birthday party with a proper gift. The shift happened gradually, around her 13th birthday. Jasmine started noticing what other girls had: their fancy homes, designer clothes, vacations to Europe, things I couldn't provide on a nurse's salary. "Mom, Brittany's going to Paris this summer," she'd said one evening, pushing food around her plate. "Her whole family goes every year." "That sounds lovely," I'd replied, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Maybe someday we can go somewhere special." 2. She had looked at me, her face suddenly older than her years. "We're never going to Paris, are we? We're never going to have what they have." I remembered the shame that burned inside me. We might not have those things, but we have each other. That's worth more. She hadn't believed me. As she entered high school, Jasmine began fabricating a different life for herself. She told friends I was a hospital administrator, not a floor nurse. She invented business trips when I was actually working night shifts. Once, when dropping off a homework assignment she'd forgotten, I overheard her telling a friend that our modest apartment was just temporary while our real house was being renovated. College changed her even more. She attended State University on scholarships and financial aid, but told everyone she'd chosen it over Ivy League offers. She joined a sorority filled with wealthy girls, somehow managing to keep up appearances. I worked extra shifts to send her spending money, which she used to buy the right clothes, the right accessories, whatever she needed to belong in their world. And then came Richard. From an established family, old money, connections to everyone who mattered. Their first date led to a second, then a 10th, then a proposal. Through it all, I remained Jasmine's hidden secret. "My mother is very private," she told his parents, when they asked why they hadn't met me after 6 months of dating. I learned this from the rare hurried calls Jasmine made, coaching me on what to say when I finally did meet them. Don't mention the hospital unless they specifically ask what you do, she instructed. Don't talk about growing up in Millfield. Say, you lived just outside the city. And Mom, please don't tell those stories about working double shifts or how we used to clip coupons. Each request had cut deeper, but I had nodded, agreed, diminished myself to fit into the narrative she was creating. The Prestons, Richard's parents, had been polite when we finally met, though Mrs. Preston's eyes lingered on my hands, roughened by years of hospital-grade soap and sanitizer. Mr. Preston asked vague questions about my professional life, which I answered with equally vague responses as Jasmine had coached. Watching them now across the reception hall, I could see how they fit into Jasmine's desired world. Mrs. Preston in her designer dress, diamonds glittering at her throat, Mr. Preston effortlessly commanding respect from everyone around him. They were everything Jasmine aspired to, everything I wasn't. Would you like more water, ma'am? A young waiter paused at my table, the only one who'd spoken to me in over an hour. Yes, thank you, I said, smiling at him. My table companion, a distant cousin of Richard's who was equally misplaced, had abandoned me after the ceremony, finding friends at another table. I checked my watch. The buffet should have been scheduled to arrive in 20 minutes. Soon, everyone would discover what I had done. My stomach tightened at the thought, not from regret, but from anticipation. Across the room, Jasmine laughed at something Richard's father said, touching his arm with practiced charm. She caught my eye briefly and quickly looked away, as if afraid. Acknowledging me might somehow reveal her true origins. That moment of deliberate dismissal solidified something inside me. For over 30 years, I had lived for my daughter, sacrificed everything for her happiness. I had accepted her growing shame of me as something I deserved, as if my working-class existence was something to apologize for. The coordinator was now checking her watch and speaking hurriedly into her headset, likely wondering where the catering staff was. In approximately 19 minutes, the perfect façade Jasmine had built would begin to crack. I didn't feel vindictive as I watched the growing confusion among the staff. This wasn't about punishment, it was about truth. For once, Jasmine would have to face reality without me smoothing the way, without me diminishing myself to elevate her. "Excuse me," Richard said, suddenly appearing beside my table. I hadn't noticed him approaching. "Mrs. Mitchell, my mother was wondering if you'd like to join us for some photos before the dinner begins." I looked past him to where Mrs. Preston stood, her smile tight but present. Was this pity? Had she noticed my isolation? "That's very kind," I replied, standing. "But I'm curious, was this your mother's idea or yours?" He hesitated, just for a moment. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," I said, straightening my shoulders. Richard glanced around before lowering his voice. "Jasmine wasn't. I don't think it's right, how you've been treated today." For the first time, I really looked at my new son-in-law, seeing, past the privilege and polished exterior, there was genuine discomfort in his eyes, maybe even decency. "Thank you for that," I said softly. "I'll join you for photos. But Richard..." "Yes? I hope you're prepared for what's coming next. It might tell you a lot about the woman you just married." He frowned, confusion crossing his features. "What do you mean?" I smiled, a real smile this time. "You'll see very soon. Sometimes the truth needs to be served cold." The photographer arranged us in carefully orchestrated poses. Richard's extended family surrounding the newlyweds while I stood at the edge, barely in frame. Jasmine's smile remained fixed, though her eyes darted nervously to me every few seconds. She knew something was wrong but couldn't place it. "Could the mother of the bride step closer, please?" the photographer called. I moved forward, my heels clicking deliberately on the marble floor. Jasmine stiffened when I stood beside her. Not that close, she whispered, shifting away. You're blocking Aunt Catherine. Richard cleared his throat. Actually, I think Mrs. Mitchell should be front and center. She is your mother, after all. Jasmine's face tightened, but she didn't argue. The flash went off, capturing the tension between us in permanent digital record. As the photos wrapped up, the wedding coordinator appeared, her professional composure beginning to slip. She whispered urgently to the venue manager, both of them casting worried glances toward the kitchen. I checked my watch. 5 minutes until the scheduled dinner announcement. Is everything all right? Mrs. Preston asked, noticing the commotion. Just a small timing issue, the coordinator assured her with a strained smile. We'll have everyone seated momentarily. The guests were already making their way to their assigned tables, chatting happily, anticipating the gourmet meal I had selected months ago. A lavish spread featuring prime rib, seared scallops, and hand-rolled pasta stations. None of which would materialize. I returned to my lonely table, watching the confusion unfold like a slow-motion car crash. The coordinator was now practically running between the kitchen and her office, her headset clutched in her hand rather than on her ear. The catering staff stood in a confused cluster near the service entrance. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ's voice boomed across the hall. If you'll please take your seats, dinner will be served shortly. Mrs. Preston glided over to the coordinator, her diamonds catching the light. Though I couldn't hear their conversation, I could read the growing concern on the older woman's face. She turned toward the kitchen, then back to the coordinator, her posture becoming increasingly rigid. It was only a matter of minutes now. Jasmine and Richard made their entrance as newlyweds, the guests applauding as they took their seats at the head table. My daughter was glowing, basking in the perfection of her day, unaware that it was about to collapse around her. The venue manager approached the microphone, his forehead shiny with sweat. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the slight delay. We're experiencing a situation with tonight's dinner service. Please enjoy your drinks and bread service while we sort this out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jasmine's smile faltered as she leaned over to whisper to Richard. He frowned, then signaled to the coordinator, who hurried over to their table. I sipped my water, oddly calm as I watched my daughter's expression transform from confusion to alarm. She stood abruptly, following the coordinator toward the kitchen. Richard hesitated, then went after her. The minutes ticked by. Hungry guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The bread baskets emptied. Wine glasses were refilled with increasing frequency. Finally, Jasmine emerged from the kitchen, her face ashen. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me. The look she gave me, it wasn't anger, not yet. It was disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. The venue manager returned to the microphone, clearing his throat awkwardly. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that there has been a cancellation with tonight's catering service. We're working to arrange alternative options, but it may take some time. The room erupted in confused chatter. At the head table, Richard's father rose to his feet, his face reddening. What do you mean, canceled? We have over 200 guests here. I understand, sir, the manager replied. It appears there was a deliberate cancellation earlier today. All eyes turned to Jasmine, who stood frozen in the center of the room. Then slowly, her gaze locked on me. Understanding dawned on her face like a terrible sunrise. You, she whispered, but in the awkward silence, everyone heard. You did this. I didn't deny it. I simply met her gaze steadily. Mrs. Mitchell canceled the buffet service approximately 3 hours ago. The coordinator explained to Richard's parents, her voice strained. Since she was the contracting party who paid for the service, she had the authority to do so. Is this true? Richard asked, appearing at Jasmine's side. He looked at me, confusion and disappointment clouding his features. I stood, suddenly aware. that every person in the room was staring at me. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I canceled it." Jasmine marched toward me, her wedding dress rustling furiously with each step. "How could you?" she hissed when she reached me. "How could you ruin my wedding day?" "The same way you could seat your mother, who paid for this entire reception, at the staff table," I replied calmly. "The same way you could call me an intrusive old woman for simply asking why." Her face flushed. "That's different. This is sabotage." "No, Jasmine. This is consequence." Richard approached cautiously. "You paid for the entire reception?" he asked me, his voice low. "She did not," Jasmine interjected. "I told you my savings covered it." "All $32,000 of it?" I asked quietly. "From your entry-level marketing job?" The color drained from Jasmine's face. "I was going to pay you back," she whispered. Richard's expression hardened as he turned to his new wife. "You told me your mother was contributing a little something, not funding the entire event. You said your savings and my contribution covered everything else." "Richard, I can explain." "Don't bother," he cut her off. "I think your mother just did." The room had gone deathly quiet. Every guest was witnessing the implosion of the perfect façade Jasmine had constructed. Mrs. Preston stood nearby, her face a mask of controlled shock. "Mr. Reynolds," I addressed the venue manager. "I believe I still have a credit from the canceled catering. Would it cover pizza delivery for everyone?" He blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I can arrange that immediately." "Please do," I said, then turned back to my daughter. "I may be just a nurse, Jasmine, but I taught you better than to treat people as if they're disposable, especially the ones who love you most." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Mrs. Preston's voice behind me. "Elise, wait." I paused but didn't turn around. "Please stay," she continued. "This is still your daughter's wedding." I looked back over my shoulder. "No," I said softly. "Today made it very clear that I'm not welcome in my daughter's new life. I've finally decided to believe her." The night air felt clean against my face as I stepped outside the Westfield Country Club. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my car keys, the full weight of what I'd just done finally settling over me. Behind me, the elegant venue still glowed with light, but I could imagine the chaos. Unfolding inside, hungry guests, frantic staff, and my daughter's perfect day crumbling to pieces. Part of me wanted to collapse, to break down sobbing in the front seat of my 10-year-old Honda. But something else was rising within me, a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in decades. As I started the engine, a figure appeared in my headlights. Richard, still in his tuxedo, was striding toward my car. I nearly drove away, but curiosity held me in place. I rolled down my window as he approached. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, slightly out of breath. "Please, don't leave yet." "I think I've caused enough disruption for one evening," I replied. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. "I had no idea about any of it. The money, how she treated you." He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. "I wouldn't have allowed it if I'd known." "Wouldn't you?" I asked softly. "You've been dating my daughter for 2 years, Richard. Did you never wonder why she kept me at a distance?" "Why I was never included in your family gatherings." He had the decency to look ashamed. "She told me you were busy, that you preferred to keep to yourself, that you were." "Difficult." "Difficult," I repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what she calls it when someone doesn't fit into her carefully curated image?" Richard glanced back at the venue. "My parents are mortified, not about the food. They don't care about that. They're appalled that Jasmine would treat her mother this way, especially after everything you've done." I hadn't expected that. The Prestons had struck me as people who valued appearance above all else. "My mother grew up poor," Richard continued. She worked as a waitress to put herself through college. Dad met her when she was serving tables at his parents' country club. He gave a humorless laugh. They're big on the never forget where you came from philosophy. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jasmine had been so desperate to impress a family that would have respected her more for embracing her roots rather than hiding them. What will you do now? I asked. Richard's expression hardened. I honestly don't know. Finding out your new wife has been lying about something so fundamental. He shook his head. I need time to think. I'm sorry, I said, surprised. To find I meant it. I didn't cancel the buffet to hurt you. I know. He looked directly at me. I don't blame you, Mrs. Mitchell. I just wish I'd seen this side of Jasmine before today. As he walked back toward the venue, I sat in my car, watching his retreating figure. The satisfaction I'd anticipated feeling had turned into something more complex. I hadn't just exposed Jasmine's deception. I'd potentially derailed her entire future. I drove home in silence, no radio, no thoughts of what came next. Just the gentle hum of the engine and the growing distance between me and the life I'd lived until now. My apartment felt different when I returned, smaller but somehow more mine than it had ever been. I kicked off my shoes, hung up my dress, and scrubbed the makeup from my face. In the mirror, I looked older, tired, but there was something else there too. A glint of strength in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. My phone rang just after midnight. Jasmine's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again, and again. On the fourth call, I finally answered. How could you? Her voice was raw, either from crying or shouting. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said simply. I stood up for myself. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Richard's parents think I'm some kind of gold digger now. The reception was a disaster. We had to serve pizza at my wedding. Pizza? Her voice broke. Richard won't even look at me. He's sleeping in another room at the hotel. I should have felt guilty, but all I could think was, good. Let her face the truth for once. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said honestly. But I'm not sorry for what I did. Because you're jealous, she spat. You've always been jealous that I escaped our pathetic life, that I found a way out while you're still stuck in that dingy apartment, working those awful shifts. Her words stung, but not as much as they once would have. Is that really what you think of me, Jasmine? Of our life together? It's the truth, she insisted. I worked hard to build something better than what you gave me. No, I said quietly. You worked hard to pretend you were someone else. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Richard wants to annul the marriage, she finally said, her voice small. I closed my eyes, feeling a pang of sadness despite everything. I'm truly sorry about that. Are you? She demanded. This is exactly what you wanted. What I wanted was to be treated with basic respect by my only child, I countered. What I wanted was for you to be proud of who you are and where you came from, not ashamed of it. Well, congratulations, she said bitterly. You've made your point. My marriage is ruined, my in-laws hate me, and all my friends saw me for the fraud you think I am. Are you happy now? The question hung between us. Was I happy? No. But I wasn't crushed under the weight of her expectations anymore either. I'm free, I answered honestly. And maybe someday, when you stop blaming me for the consequences of your own choices, you will be too. She hung up without another word. I slept surprisingly well that night. In the morning, I called the hospital and requested a change in my schedule. No more night shifts, no more double shifts. I'd been working myself to exhaustion for years to fund Jasmine's lifestyle. That ended now. 3 days after the wedding, a knock at my door surprised me. When I opened it, I found Mrs. Preston standing in my hallway. elegant even in casual clothes. "May I come in?" she asked. Bewildered, I stepped aside to let her enter. She surveyed my modest apartment without judgment, then turned to face me. "Elise, I owe you an apology," she said. "I suspected something wasn't right with how Jasmine spoke about you, but I never intervened." "You don't owe me anything," I replied. "You barely know me." She smiled sadly. "That's precisely the problem. We should have known you. You should have been included all along." She hesitated before continuing. "Richard has decided to file for annulment. He feels the marriage was founded on too many lies." I nodded, unsurprised, but still sad for everyone involved. "He admires what you did," she added. "Standing up for yourself that way, we all do." "Even though it ruined the wedding?" Mrs. Preston, Catherine, smiled. "The wedding was already ruined when they seated you at that table." She reached for my hand. "Jasmine has a lot of growing up to do. Perhaps this will be the wake-up call she needs." After she left, I stood at my window for a long time, watching the street below. For 31 years, I had defined myself as Jasmine's mother, measuring my worth by her happiness. Now I faced an unfamiliar question. Who was Elise Mitchell without that role consuming her entire identity? For the first time in decades, I was eager to find out. 2 months passed. Autumn painted the world in warm colors, and I found myself noticing them in a way I hadn't for years. The fiery reds of maple leaves, the golden glow of afternoon sunlight filtering through my kitchen window. Small pleasures I'd been too exhausted or preoccupied to appreciate before. I hadn't spoken to Jasmine since our phone call the night of the wedding. The annulment had been finalized quickly and quietly. According to hospital gossip, news travels fast when your daughter's failed marriage becomes the subject of local chatter. Jasmine had moved back to her apartment in the city and taken a leave of absence from her job. Part of me ached to reach out to comfort her through what must be a humiliating time. But another part, a stronger part that was growing more confident each day, knew that this space was necessary for both of us. "You're looking well, Elise," Dr. Winters commented as we finished our shift handover. At 62, he'd been at Memorial longer than anyone, and had watched me rush through countless shifts to make ends meet. "There's color in your cheeks again," I smiled, realizing he was right. The perpetual exhaustion that had become my normal state had lifted. I was working reasonable hours, sleeping properly, even taking an art class at the community center on Thursdays. "I feel better," I admitted. "Turns out working yourself to death isn't actually a sustainable lifestyle." He laughed, then grew serious. "And your daughter? How is she handling everything?" I sighed. "I honestly don't know. We haven't spoken." "Give it time," he advised, patting my shoulder. "Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can rebuild." Rock bottom. I wondered if Jasmine saw it that way, or if she still blamed me entirely for her current situation. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at Marconi's, a small Italian restaurant I'd always loved but rarely visited. Saving money for Jasmine had become such a habit that spending on myself felt almost transgressive. I sat at a quiet corner table, enjoying a glass of wine with my pasta, when a familiar voice called my name. "Nurse Mitchell? Is that you?" I looked up to see Richard's father, William Preston, standing beside my table. His presence was so unexpected that for a moment I could only stare. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner," he said, seeming genuinely apologetic. "I just wanted to say hello." "Of course," I managed, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Would you like to join me?" He hesitated, then nodded, sitting down with an ease that spoke of privilege and confidence. "I've been hoping to run into you," he admitted. "Catherine told me she visited you, but I was traveling at the time." I nodded, unsure what to say. The last time I'd seen this man, his son's wedding was imploding because of my actions. "I wanted to thank you," he said, surprising me. Thank me? For what? For showing us who Jasmine really was before Richard became legally entangled with her. He signaled the waiter for a glass of wine. Don't misunderstand. I take no pleasure in young people's suffering. But what she did, how she treated you. He shook his head. Richard deserves better, and so do you. The waiter brought his wine, and William raised his glass slightly. To honesty, however painful it may be. I touched my glass to his, feeling oddly seen in a way I hadn't expected from someone of his status. How is Richard? Recovering, William replied. He's thrown himself into work, taken an assignment in our London office for a few months. Distance helps, I think. I nodded, understanding the healing power of separation all too well. And your daughter? He asked, his tone gentle rather than accusatory. We haven't spoken, I admitted. I think we both need time. William studied me for a moment. You know, Catherine came from a background not unlike yours. Hard-working parents, modest means. She put herself through college waiting tables. He smiled slightly. My parents were horrified when I brought her home. They expected me to marry someone from our social circle. This revelation surprised me. Mrs. Preston carried herself with such natural grace and confidence that I'd assumed she'd been born into privilege. What changed their minds? I asked. Nothing, he replied with a small laugh. They never fully accepted her. But I didn't care. I loved her for exactly who she was, not who my parents wanted her to be. The parallel wasn't lost on me. Jasmine was so concerned with impressing your family. If she'd only known. That's the tragedy of pretense, William said. In trying to be someone else, we often miss connecting with the very people who would appreciate our authentic selves. We finished our meals, talking easily about his business, my nursing career, the community art class I'd recently joined. When the bill came, he insisted on paying, waving away my protests. Consider it a small apology for our not recognizing sooner what was happening, he said. Catherine and I would like to have you over for dinner sometime, if you're comfortable with that. I found myself agreeing, touched by the unexpected friendship emerging from such painful circumstances. As I drove home, I thought about William's words regarding authenticity. For years, I had diminished myself to accommodate Jasmine's ambitions, playing along with her fabrications, accepting her growing shame of me as something I deserved. I had been complicit in my own erasure. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke to a text message from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Richard. I got your number from my mother. I'm in London for work, but will be back next month. I'd like to meet for coffee if you're willing. There are some things I'd like to say in person. I stared at the message, surprised by the request, but even more, surprised by my willingness to accept it. I typed back a simple response. I'd like that, Richard. Let me know when you're back. A week later, I was leaving my shift when I spotted a familiar figure sitting in the hospital's small courtyard. My heart stuttered in my chest. Jasmine. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfits. When she saw me, she stood, hands fidgeting nervously at her sides. Mom, she said, her voice small. I approached cautiously, unsure why she was here or what she wanted. Jasmine. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, she admitted. I wasn't sure when your shift ended, and I was afraid to come inside in case you didn't want to see me. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident, sometimes arrogant daughter I knew. This was someone broken, humbled. Why are you here? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She took a deep breath. Because I owe you an apology, and because I didn't know where else to go. I studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found only exhaustion and shame. Against my better judgment, I felt my heart soften slightly. "Let's go somewhere we can talk," I said, gesturing toward the cafe across the street. As we walked, Jasmine kept glancing at me as if afraid I might disappear. I wondered what had finally brought her here, and whether it was genuine remorse or simply having nowhere else to turn. Either way, I was about to find out. The cafe was quiet in the late afternoon, just a few patrons scattered among the tables. Jasmine followed me to a corner booth, her usual confident stride replaced by hesitant steps. We ordered simple black coffee for me, a latte for her, and sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. "You look different," she finally said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "So do you," I replied. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not in a good way, I'm afraid." I didn't contradict her. The polish and perfection she'd always maintained had crumbled, revealing something raw underneath. "I lost my job," she said abruptly. "Apparently, having your marriage annulled after a publicly disastrous wedding makes you a liability in corporate marketing." "I'm sorry to hear that," she shrugged. "Don't be. I hated that job anyway." She looked up at me, a flash of her old defiance returning. "I only took it because the title sounded impressive and the company name opened doors." The honesty surprised me. "What will you do now?" "I don't know." She stirred her latte absently. "That's partly why I'm here. Everything I built, my marriage, my career, my social circle, it's all collapsed. And I realized something terrifying." She paused, swallowing. I realized it was all a house of cards. Nothing was real. I watched her struggle with this admission, resisting the urge to comfort her. For once, I needed to let her navigate her own emotions without rushing to smooth them away. "You were right," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I was ashamed. Of where I came from. Of our apartment. Of your job. Of clipping coupons and buying off-brand cereal." She wiped at a tear that escaped. "Of you." The words still hurt, but less than before. I'd already faced this truth. "When did it start?" I asked. "When did you become ashamed of me?" She considered the question carefully. "I was 13, I think. Meredith Lawson invited me to her birthday party at her family's lake house. It was the first time I'd been included, by the popular girls." She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "Her mother asked what you did, and I panicked. I said you were a doctor." I remembered that weekend, how excited she'd been about the invitation, how she'd begged me for a new swimsuit I could barely afford. I'd picked up an extra shift to buy it for her. "After that, it just got easier to lie," she continued. "And then I couldn't stop. Every lie needed another lie to support it. By the time I met Richard, I was living in a completely fictional world." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm paying for it." Her laugh was hollow. "Richard won't speak to me. His family despises me. The friends I thought I had have abandoned me." She looked directly at me for the first time. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did. And I'm sorry. Not just for the wedding, but for years of treating you like you weren't good enough." The sincerity in her voice touched something deep in me, but I wasn't ready to absolve her completely. "What do you want from me, Jasmine?" She flinched at the directness of the question. "Nothing. I mean—" She stopped, reconsidering. "That's not true. I do want something. I want a chance to know you again. The real you, not the version I tried to erase. And maybe, if it's not too late, a chance for you to know the real me." "And who is that?" I asked. "The real you?" She smiled sadly. "I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to find out." I took a sip of my coffee, giving myself time to think. Part of me wanted to embrace her, to tell her all was forgiven. But we'd been down that road before, my unconditional love enabling her worst behavior. This won't be easy, I said finally. I'm not the same person I was 2 months ago. I'm not willing to be sidelined in your life anymore, or to pretend I'm something I'm not. I don't want you to, she said quickly. I'm done with pretending. And I can't be your financial safety net, I continued. I've spent years sacrificing my own security to fund your lifestyle. That stops now. She nodded, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. I understand. I need to stand on my own feet. Yes, you do. I set my cup down. But if you're serious about starting over, about building something real this time, then yes, we can try to know each other again. Slowly. The relief on her face was palpable. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, I warned. This will be harder than you think. She nodded, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Before I forget, this is yours. She slid it across the table. It's not everything, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $5,000. I looked up, questioning. I sold my designer handbags and some jewelry, she explained. I wanted to start paying you back for the wedding. For everything. The gesture meant more than the money. For the first time, perhaps ever, Jasmine was taking responsibility for her actions in a concrete way. One day at a time, I said, pocketing the check. We parted with a tentative hug, both aware of the fragile nature of our reconnection. As I watched her walk away, I felt cautiously hopeful, not just for her, but for myself and the boundaries I was finally learning to establish. Year passed, seasons changed, and so did we. Jasmine found a job at a small nonprofit, less prestigious than her corporate position, but more fulfilling. She moved to a modest apartment, started therapy, and slowly rebuilt her life on a foundation of truth rather than appearance. Our relationship evolved gradually. Weekly coffee dates became regular dinners. We argued sometimes, healthy disagreements where neither of us backed down out of fear or obligation. We learned to respect each other's boundaries, and most importantly, we learned, to be honest, as for me, I bloomed in ways I never expected. The art class I'd joined led to a small exhibition of my paintings at a local gallery. I started mentoring younger nurses at the hospital. I traveled, just weekend trips at first, then a 2-week vacation to Italy, something I'd always dreamed of but never believed possible. I also developed an unexpected friendship with Catherine and William Preston. What began as a single dinner invitation evolved into regular social engagements. Catherine and I discovered a shared love of gardening. William sometimes joined me at community art events. They treated me as an equal, valuing my company for who I was, not who my daughter had married. You look happy, Richard said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Our occasional meetings had become a comfortable routine. He'd transferred permanently to the London office but visited monthly for business. I am, I replied, realizing the truth of it. Happier than I've been in years. It suits you, he smiled. Have you heard from Jasmine recently? I nodded. She's doing well. The nonprofit just promoted her to outreach coordinator. Good for her. His response was genuine, the initial bitterness having faded to a distant empathy. He'd started dating someone new, a doctor he'd met through his parents, and the relationship seemed to be flourishing. Later that evening, as I prepared for dinner with Jasmine, I caught my reflection in the mirror. At 59, my face showed the lines of a life fully lived, the worry creases of a single mother, the laugh lines of recent joy. My hair, now styled in a confident bob rather than the practical ponytail I'd worn for years, was more silver than brown. I barely recognized the woman who had once slipped quietly into her daughter's wedding, accepting her place at the waiter's table without protest. That Elise had disappeared, replaced by someone stronger, someone unwilling to be diminished. The doorbell rang. Jasmine stood on the threshold, holding a small gift bag. "What's this?" I asked, inviting her in. "Open it," she urged. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a paintbrush. "It's to celebrate your second exhibition," she explained. "I'm so proud of you, Mom." The words, once so rare from her lips, brought tears to my eyes. Not because I needed her approval, but because they reflected how far we'd both come. "Thank you," I said, fastening it around my wrist. As we walked to the restaurant, chatting easily about our weeks, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. It had taken a missed buffet, a ruined wedding, and a year of painful growth, but we'd finally found our way to something authentic. Sometimes the most important tables aren't the ones at the front of the room, adorned with flowers and surrounded by important people. Sometimes they're the ones that force you to stand up, walk away, and finally, claim your rightful place in your own life.